The flashing blue and red lights lit up my newly paved driveway like a Christmas tree. I stood still, my cane steady in one hand and my leather duffel bag in the other, as two police cruisers rolled up and came to a sharp stop in front of my porch. Doors swung open. 3 officers stepped out, hands near their belts, eyes scanning me like I was a threat. "Sir, we received a call from the Homeowners Association," one of them said, voice firm but not rude. "They reported suspicious activity, said you were trespassing." I blinked slowly, tilted my head and let the silence hang. My heart beat calmly in my chest. I looked past them and saw Linda Wilkins, the HOA president, standing at the edge of the street with her arms folded tight across her chest, face pinched in bitter triumph. She was flanked by 2 other board members, each with that same smug expression, like they just scored a win over a common criminal. I adjusted my straw fedora. "I'm not trespassing," I said, my voice calm and deliberate. "You got ID?" the younger officer asked, already reaching for his notepad. I slowly handed him my wallet. He flipped through my documents and then frowned. "Mr. Harold Turner," he said, looking between the ID and me. "That's right," I replied. "You just moved in here today." I nodded, "Moved in this morning." The officers exchanged a look. The first one sighed and turned back to the HOA board members. "He owns the house," he called out. "Everything checks out." That wiped the smirk off Linda's face. But it wasn't over. "I'd like to file a formal complaint," she shouted, marching forward. "We have rules in this neighborhood. We were never notified about any sale. He can't just show up and—" "Ma'am, this is not a police matter," the officer cut her off. I stood silently as the argument continued between her and the officers. They were still treating me like just another old man with no voice. They had no idea what I had planned, no idea who I was, no idea that everything they were clinging to, their authority, their rules, their little kingdom, was about to change. Because in less than 24 hours, I would be their new boss. And they would have no choice but to obey. But for now, I smiled politely, tipped my hat to the officers, and stepped inside my home. I shut the door slowly, locked it, then leaned against the wall and took a deep breath. It had begun. Let me take you back to where it all started. 2 weeks earlier, I was sitting alone on a bench near Washington Lake, watching a group of kids chase each other along the shore. The sun was soft on my face, and the breeze carried the scent of springtime, fresh cut grass, wildflowers, and old memories. My late wife, Eleanor, and I used to come here when we first moved to the city, decades ago. She passed away 3 years back, cancer. I hadn't been the same since. At 74, most men would have retired and settled somewhere quiet, maybe taken up gardening or joined a chess club, but not me. I had too much unfinished business, especially with the world we lived in. Too many people nowadays forgot about kindness, empathy, respect. They barked rules, drew lines, built fences, literal and invisible, and called it order. But what about people? What about heart? That's why when my lawyer called and told me about the property listing in Pine Hill Estates, something clicked. I remembered the neighborhood. Eleanor and I almost bought there once back in the 80s, but the HOA was strict even then. I had refused. She had laughed and called me stubborn. I never expected to end up back there, but this time I wouldn't just buy a home. I'd buy a position. The previous property owner was an old friend of mine, Richard Grayson. He had served as chairman of the HOA board for years until a stroke forced him to step down. We weren't close, but we respected each other. He sold me his house, quietly, off-market, and then handed me something even more powerful. A signed transfer of his chairmanship. That's right, I didn't just become a resident of Pine Hill Estates. I became the new HOA chairman. But here's the twist. HOA rules required a formal announcement and a 30-day orientation process before new leadership was revealed. The board hadn't been notified yet because I wanted to see them for who they truly were before they knew I was in charge. I had a plan. When I arrived that morning, I wore a worn jacket, old jeans, and scuffed brown boots. My truck was dusty, my cane scratched. I looked nothing like the typical resident. The neighborhood was clean and polished, manicured lawns, 3-car garages, smiling dogs on perfect leashes. But the smiles faded the moment I stepped out of that truck. I saw curtains part, faces peek through windows, whispers began. One woman stood on her porch holding her phone like a weapon. Another guy scowled at me while watering his lawn. It didn't take long. Just 2 hours after I moved in, I received my first visit. Knock, knock, knock. Good morning, came the high-pitched voice. It was Linda Wilkins, mid-50s, sharp suit, clipboard, HOA president. She smiled, but her eyes didn't. I noticed you moving in and wanted to welcome you, she said. Also, we like to ensure all residents are familiar with our community standards. She handed me a thick packet of printed rules. No loud music, no gardening on weekends, no exterior paint changes without board approval, no flags outside the allotted space, no outdoor clotheslines, lawn must be trimmed every Wednesday, driveway must remain oil-free. I smiled gently and nodded. Thank you, I said. You'll need to register your vehicle within 24 hours, she added, and schedule an interview with the HOA board to review your residency. An interview? I asked, raising a brow. Yes, we like to vet new neighbors, keeps the place respectable. That was the moment I knew what kind of people I was dealing with. Power-hungry, controlling, fearful of anything that didn't fit their image of perfect. Still, I played along. I'll get right on that, I replied. But behind my calm face, I was already taking notes. The next few days were revealing. A teenager down the street was fined $75 for skateboarding on the sidewalk. A single mother got a violation notice for leaving her trash bins out 5 minutes late. A retired veteran was warned for planting sunflowers in a front-facing garden bed instead of board-approved flowers. And then came the worst. An elderly woman, Miss Carroll, was given a warning for having unsightly Christmas lights still hanging on her back porch. It was mid-January. She had no one to help her remove them. Her husband had passed a month earlier. I offered to take them down for her. She smiled and cried. The next morning, I got a notice in my mailbox. Unauthorized property modifications. Fine, $50. That was when I knew this wasn't just about rules. This was about control. That's when I decided to act. But I had to wait. The formal announcement of my position as chairman was still 2 weeks away. Until then, I had to endure whatever they threw at me. I kept my head down, I listened, I watched, I waited. Until Linda called the cops. And everything changed. Now, as I sat on my porch that evening, sipping iced tea and watching the sun dip behind the rooftops, I knew the next move was mine. And I was going to make it count. But first, I had to shake them a little more. Because tomorrow, I was going to attend their board meeting. And they wouldn't see me coming. Where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments. The next morning arrived with a strange calm. Birds chirped, sprinklers ticked in sync, and a golden sun spilled softly across the pristine lawns of Pine Hill Estates. But beneath that peaceful mask, the air buzzed with quiet tension. I felt it in my bones. The neighborhood was watching me. Word had already spread. The old man the cops were called on, he's still here. I sipped my coffee slowly on the front porch, the same porch they tried to chase me from the day before. I wore a crisp shirt this time, ironed and tucked in, with a pair of slacks and my old army boots. Not because I wanted to look impressive, but because I wanted to remind myself that I wasn't here to fit in. I was here to change things. I had waited long enough. This was the day of the monthly HOA board meeting, the one Linda Wilkins chaired with a grip so tight, even the grass trembled when she passed. It was held every third Saturday at 10 a.m. sharp at the community clubhouse, a place I hadn't yet visited but heard enough about to know it was their war room. And today, I was going to war. At 9:45 a.m., I arrived at the clubhouse with my folder tucked under my arm. The parking lot was already lined with shiny SUVs and luxury sedans. A few board members lingered outside, chatting and casting sideways glances at me. One of them, a tall man in a golf shirt and perfectly slicked-back gray hair, stepped in front of me just as I reached the door. Excuse me, sir," he said, holding out a hand. "These meetings are for residents only." I smiled politely. "I am a resident." He glanced down at the folder in my hand, then back up. We still require all residents to register in advance for speaking time. You can submit your concerns in writing. I don't plan to speak today, I said. I just came to listen. He hesitated, then stepped aside, lips pursed. Inside, the room was clean and cold. White walls, beige carpet, metal chairs arranged in perfect rows. At the front stood a long table where Linda and the rest of the board members sat, nameplates gleaming in front of them. A large projector screen behind them displayed a PowerPoint slide. Pine Hill Estates HOA monthly board meeting. Linda's eyes locked onto me the moment I walked in. Her smile was tight, but her tone was anything but sweet. Mr. Turner, didn't expect you here. I nodded, didn't want to miss the fun. Her eyes narrowed ever so slightly. I took a seat in the second row. A few residents turned to look at me. Some whispered. One woman gave me a small smile and nod. Another scooted her chair away. The meeting began. Linda welcomed everyone, thanked the board for their tireless work, and jumped straight into violations, fines, and budget reports. For nearly 30 minutes, she spoke about homeowners who had broken approved paint code and garbage bin positioning violations, as though they were criminal offenses. I watched, I listened. Then came the moment I was waiting for. We'll now open the floor to community feedback, Linda said, folding her hands. A few residents stood up to complain about arbitrary fines, one about a delay in fixing the community pool's filter. Another, a young father, spoke about getting fined for having a kid's soccer net in his backyard. Linda listened, nodded, and shot them all down one by one. Rules are rules. Then she looked at me. Mr. Turner, anything to share? The room went quiet. I stood slowly and with purpose. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't come to explode. I just said, "No, thank you. I'll be seeing you all again very soon." And I sat back down. Linda blinked, confused. Then she moved on. That night, I opened the drawer in my study and pulled out the sealed envelope Richard Grayson had given me before he moved away. Inside was the HOA chairmanship transfer agreement, signed and notarized. Also inside was the login to the HOA board's internal portal, the official leadership documents, and most importantly, a letter from Richard himself. "Harold, I trust you more than anyone to carry on what we started years ago. This community lost its soul. You still have yours. Make it right." The next morning, I made the call to the HOA's regional legal office, and within hours, a notification was sent to every board member. Effective immediately, Harold Turner is the appointed interim chairman of the Pine Hill Estates Homeowners Association. Per HOA bylaws, Section 4.3, the outgoing chairman has the authority to appoint a successor without board vote in cases of medical resignation. The announcement was sent via email and physical notice. I heard Linda's scream from across the street. But I wasn't done. I scheduled an emergency board meeting for the following day. It was 6 p.m. when they arrived. One by one, board members entered the clubhouse, jaws tight, brows furrowed. They hadn't expected this, especially not from me. I sat at the head of the table now. Linda sat 2 seats down, refusing to look at me. I opened the meeting without waiting for permission. "Good evening," I said. "Let's begin." Linda scoffed. "You think this is going to stick?" "I know it will." "You don't know how we run things here," she said, crossing her arms. I leaned forward. "That's the thing, Linda. I don't want to run things like they were. I want to rebuild this neighborhood into something better." "Better?" she spat. "We're the #1 rated community in the county." "No," I said calmly. "You're the most feared. That's not the same thing." Silence. I continued. "Starting today, we'll be revisiting the fine system. Every violation will require photographic evidence, a warning notice, and a 7-day grace period. The automatic fine system is suspended pending review." Murmurs. Linda pounded the table. "You can't just come in here and make changes." "I can," I said, "and I just did." She stood furious. "I've worked too hard for this. You're not going to ruin everything." I stood too. My voice was low but firm. "I'm not here to ruin it, Linda. I'm here to save it from you." By the end of the meeting, the board was split. 2 members supported the change, 2 didn't, 1 abstained. Linda stormed out before the vote. I stayed back to clean the room. As I was wiping the table, a woman approached me, Martha Jenkins, a retired schoolteacher who lived near the back gate. "You really meant what you said?" she asked. "I did." She nodded. "It's been a long time since someone stood up to her." "I'm not standing up to her," I said. "I'm standing up for everyone else." She patted my arm and left. I smiled to myself. But just as I stepped out into the parking lot, I noticed something strange. My truck had slashed tires. All 4. My smile faded. I looked around, no one in sight. But I knew. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Because someone in this neighborhood wanted a fight. And they just picked the wrong old man to mess with. The sun was just beginning to rise the next morning, its golden light creeping through the blinds of my living room as I sat in my recliner, holding a hot cup of black coffee. The silence was peaceful, but the tension in my gut was anything but. I stared at the window, thinking about the slashed tires on my truck the night before. It wasn't random. It wasn't a prank. That was a message. I'd made a move, and now someone was making one back. The neighborhood was quiet, too quiet. Normally by this time, joggers would be out, dogs would be barking, and leaf blowers would hum in the distance. But today, it was as if Pine Hill Estates was holding its breath. I finished my coffee, walked outside, and checked on my truck. The tires were still flat, slashed neatly down the sides, the rubber curled like black petals. But I didn't flinch. I didn't curse. I didn't even call the police. Instead, I got on my flip phone and made a call to a friend named Larry, a mechanic who owed me a favor from back in my Army days. By noon, a tow truck arrived, and Larry hauled my vehicle away without a fuss. I didn't want the cops involved yet. I needed to know who did it, and why. Because something told me this was bigger than a few angry board members. That afternoon, I walked down the street to Miss Carroll's house. She'd been quiet since her warning notice. I wanted to check in. When I knocked, it took a minute before she opened the door. She looked tired, her shoulders hunched, gray curls tucked under a scarf. But her face lit up when she saw me. "Mr. Turner," she said, her voice cracking with surprise. "I didn't expect to see you." "I came to check in," I said. "Mind if I come in for a minute?" She stepped aside and let me in. Her home was small but cozy. Family photos lined the walls, and the scent of cinnamon hung in the air. We sat at our tiny dining table, sipping tea. "They've been on me again," she whispered, eyes darting toward the window. "Someone came by last night, left a new violation on my porch." I leaned forward. "What for?" "They said the porch light was too bright." Her voice trembled. "But I only keep it on for safety. I live alone now, Mr. Turner." My jaw tightened. "You don't have to explain. You're not doing anything wrong." She nodded but didn't speak again. I took out my notebook and scribbled a few things down. This was the 3rd resident who had complained to me in 2 days. Each case was different, but the pattern was the same. Small infractions used as excuses to harass. "Did you see who dropped the notice off?" I asked gently. She shook her head, but I heard footsteps, fast ones, like they were running. "Interesting." I left her house an hour later, more determined than ever. These people weren't just enforcing rules, they were enforcing fear. And I wasn't going to let that continue. That evening, I called an emergency community meeting. This time, it wasn't just the board. It was for all residents. I printed flyers and placed them at every doorstep. I asked a teenager named Kevin, one of the kids who'd been fined for riding his scooter, to help me distribute them. He was eager to help. I could see the fire in his young eyes. He'd been embarrassed, shamed, and now he wanted to do something. The flyer was simple. Community Town Hall. Hosted by Chairman Harold Turner. Location, Pine Hill Clubhouse. Date, Thursday, 6:00 p.m. Topic, Taking Back Our Neighborhood. Residents only. The title was bold on purpose. I needed to get their attention. And it worked. Thursday night, the clubhouse was packed. People stood in the back, leaned against the walls, even sat on the floor. More than 60 residents showed up, families, seniors, teenagers, couples. And Linda Wilkins. She sat at the far end of the room, arms folded, her face tight with frustration. I walked to the front and tapped the mic. "Thank you for coming," I said. "I know many of you don't know me yet. My name is Harold Turner, and I'm your new HOA chairman." A few gasped, some murmurs. "Yes, it's official," I said. "I was appointed by Richard Grayson before he stepped down. I have the paperwork to prove it, and starting today, I plan to lead this community differently." Someone clapped, then another, then a few more. I continued. "I've lived a long life, 74 years to be exact. I served in the Army, raised a family, buried my wife, and I've seen a lot of neighborhoods, but I've never seen one where people are afraid to plant flowers in their yard." Laughter rippled through the room. I looked at Linda as I spoke the next line. "Pine Hill Estates became a place of punishment instead of peace. That ends now." Applause, real applause. Linda stood up. "You don't have the right." "I have every right," I interrupted, voice strong, "and so do these people." A man in the back yelled, "They fined me $200 for leaving my grill out for one night." A woman shouted, "They told me I couldn't put a tiny playhouse in my backyard for my daughter." A teenage girl spoke up, "They made us remove our chalk drawings from the sidewalk." The room erupted, and Linda couldn't stop it. "I'm implementing immediate reforms," I said, raising my voice over the crowd. "Effective next week, we're forming a residents' advisory council. Every decision will be discussed publicly. No more secret fines, no more bullying." People cheered. Linda turned red. "This is chaos." "No," I said firmly, "this is democracy." She stormed out, and the crowd cheered louder. After the meeting, I was swarmed. People shook my hand, clapped me on the back, and thanked me. Some had tears in their eyes. "Thank you for seeing us," a young mother said. "Thank you for fighting," said an elderly man with a walker. But not everyone was happy. Later that night, I returned home to find a note shoved under my door. Typed, "No signature. You're not welcome here. Leave before it gets worse." I held the paper between my fingers and stared at it. They were pushing harder now, but I wasn't going anywhere. I tucked the note into my drawer next to the tire photos. Then I double-locked my door, because the storm was coming, and I was going to walk straight into it. The morning after the town hall meeting, I woke up earlier than usual. The light outside was soft and quiet, but I could already feel the shift. Something had changed in Pine Hill Estates. For the first time in years, maybe decades, the residents had spoken up, and they hadn't been silenced. But with that shift came something else. Tension. I could feel it as soon as I stepped out onto my porch. The air felt thicker, the looks colder. Some waved, some didn't. A few cars drove past more slowly than usual, their drivers peeking curiously out the windows. Rumors were spreading like wildfire. And in the middle of it all stood me, Harold Turner, the old man who had walked in quietly and flipped their world upside down. But this wasn't about revenge or control. It was about change, about fairness, about bringing kindness back to a neighborhood that had forgotten how to be neighborly. Still, I wasn't naive. I knew the fight wasn't over. In fact, it was just beginning. Later that afternoon, as I returned from a walk to the mailbox, I found something waiting for me. A notice. Violation. Improper lawn maintenance. Grass height exceeds HOA limit. Fine, $150. Due immediately. I stared at it, baffled. My lawn had just been trimmed 2 days ago. I even had the receipt from the landscaping company. It was a joke, a clear act of retaliation. I didn't tear it up. I didn't call anyone to scream. I simply tucked the notice into my folder, right next to the anonymous threat from the night before. Every move they made I was documenting, carefully, patiently. Because when the time came, I was going to use every piece of it. That evening, I met with 2 residents who had approached me after the town hall. Kevin's father, Marcus, a soft-spoken IT technician in his 30s, and Sophia, a single mom of 3 kids who ran an at-home bakery. We sat on my porch with glasses of lemonade, watching the sun set behind the rows of identical houses. "They're angry," Marcus said. "Really angry. My neighbor told me Linda's been rallying her loyalists. She's planning something." "She never expected anyone to push back," Sophia added. "She's always been in charge. No one ever questioned it." "She's not in charge anymore," I said quietly. "We are." We talked late into the evening, sketching out ideas for the Residents' Advisory Council. We planned to hold the first informal gathering on Sunday in the community park. Open discussion. No fines. No fear. Just neighbors talking to neighbors. We printed more flyers. Kevin helped us pass them out again, door to door. But this time, we didn't get polite thanks. We got glares, cold shoulders. In some places, the flyers were ripped up on the spot. At one house, a man crumpled the paper and threw it at Kevin's feet. "Tell your little rebel leader," he sneered, "that we don't take kindly to outsiders telling us how to live." Kevin looked crushed. But I put a hand on his shoulder. "Change always scares people at first," I said, "but that doesn't mean you stop." Sunday came faster than expected. The park was small, nestled near the back gate of Pine Hill Estates, with a playground, 2 picnic tables, and a faded basketball court. We didn't expect a huge turnout. But to our surprise, over 20 people showed up. Mothers with strollers, elderly couples, teenagers, young professionals. They brought chairs, food, even a few homemade signs. One read, "Hope for Pine Hill." Another, "We are the community." We sat in a circle on the grass, and I stood in the middle. "Thank you for coming," I began. "This isn't a protest, it's not a rebellion. This is a family meeting, our family, our community." People nodded. One woman stood and shared how she was fined for planting lavender in her front yard. Another man told how his daughter was scolded for drawing hopscotch squares with chalk. An older gentleman admitted he lived in fear of parking an inch too close to the sidewalk. And then Sophia stood. "My son asked me last week if we were going to get kicked out because we hung a Nigerian flag outside our porch for Independence Day. He said, 'Mama, they don't like us here.'" She paused, eyes misting. That broke me. People clapped, some cried. And in that moment, I saw what Pine Hill could be. But just as we began to share solutions, offering to help each other with lawn care, check in on elderly neighbors, support local businesses, chaos struck. A loud crack echoed across the park. We all turned toward the playground. The metal gate at the back entrance had been slammed shut. And standing just beyond it were 3 uniformed security guards. Behind them was Linda Wilkins, arms folded, sunglasses on, lips curved in a cruel little smile. A few board members stood with her. One of the guards stepped forward and raised a megaphone. "This gathering has not been approved by the HOA. You are in violation of community policy. Disperse immediately or face fines and suspension of amenities." People gasped. "This is public space," someone shouted. "Not anymore," Linda replied from behind the guards. "The board voted this morning to classify the park as a restricted use area for safety concerns. All unauthorized gatherings are now prohibited." "That's illegal," Marcus barked, stepping forward. "No," Linda said smoothly. "It's policy. Read the bylaws." I stepped forward slowly, cane in hand, voice calm but clear. "Policy without people is tyranny." Linda smirked. "Then call it what you want, but these people have 5 minutes to clear out or we start issuing citations." Sophia pulled her kids close. Kevin looked at me, fists balled. I turned to the crowd. "Let's stay calm. We don't give them what they want." Then I turned back to Linda. "You've just made a mistake," I said. "Oh," she said mockingly, "what's that?" "You came here thinking you could scare us." I raised my voice for all to hear. "But you forgot, we're not afraid anymore." And with that, the people didn't move. Not one. Linda's face twisted in fury. She motioned to the guards. But before they could act, police sirens wailed in the distance. We all turned. 2 police cruisers pulled up outside the park gate. Officers stepped out. And now Linda's smirk vanished. Because this time, the cops weren't here for me. They were here for her. One officer approached the gate. "Ma'am, we received multiple calls about intimidation and unauthorized private security, attempting to remove residents from public property." Linda stuttered, Fear not, this is a private HOA park. The officer raised a hand. This land is publicly zoned, and these security guards don't have the authority to remove residents unless a crime is being committed. Step back, please. Linda turned pale. The officer looked at the rest of us. You're all fine, carry on. Cheers erupted from the crowd. But I didn't cheer. I watched Linda. Her eyes locked on mine. And I knew this was far from over. She wasn't going to stop. She was going to get nastier, meaner, more desperate. But I was ready. Because this neighborhood didn't belong to fear anymore. It belonged to the people. The next morning, I was sipping coffee on my porch when the neighborhood group chat exploded. Yes, Pine Hill Estates had a group chat, well, two of them technically. One was public, run by the HOA board, and the other, more recently created, was private and full of people who were tired of living in fear. Kevin's dad Marcus had started it. He added me as an admin the night after the town hall. My phone buzzed nonstop. Linda's retaliating. She just issued over 15 citations this morning. My wife got one for her wind chimes being too loud. This has to stop. I knew Linda would retaliate. She was losing control and people like her never give up power quietly. But this was war. I put down my coffee and went inside to grab my cane and notebook. It was time to fight back, but not with anger. With facts. With truth. With community. I spent the next several hours walking door to door talking to residents. Not everyone opened their door. Some still believed in Linda's version of order, but many did. Some were angry, some were scared, some were just tired. I collected a stack of violation notices, 18 in total, many of them clearly bogus. A mailbox was too modern, a flower pot was too bright, a flagpole was too tall, a barbecue grill had non-conforming covers. It was absurd and illegal. That afternoon I made calls. I called the county zoning office. I called a retired civil rights lawyer who now lived 5 blocks away. I even called the local press. I didn't say much, just that there was something happening in a quiet neighborhood, something worth seeing. Then I made my final call. To the HOA's umbrella management company, Greencrest Residential Holdings, headquartered downtown. I requested a meeting. They were reluctant until I dropped Richard Grayson's name and mentioned that the neighborhood was now making headlines. That same evening, I received a notice on my front door. HOA Emergency Resolution. Chairman Harold Turner suspended pending investigation. Signed, of course, by Linda Wilkins. Now she had crossed the line. There was only one problem. She had no authority to suspend me. Not legally. But I let the notice hang. Because I had a plan. The next morning, I arrived early at the community clubhouse with a large black binder under my arm. It was the day of the quarterly HOA public meeting. By law, it had to be open to all residents. And by law, any resident had the right to record, speak, and present grievances. By 9:50 a.m. the room was full. People who hadn't attended a single meeting in years showed up. Parents with kids, veterans, new couples, seniors with walkers. They came not just for me, but for themselves, to reclaim something they had lost. Linda walked in at 9:58 a.m., heels clicking like gunshots on the tile floor. She wore a fire-red suit, her lips tight, her eyes blazing. She took the mic before I could. "I'd like to begin today by addressing a dangerous rumor," she said. "Mr. Turner is no longer our chairman. He has been suspended for improper conduct and abuse of authority." Gasps in the room. She smiled at the reaction. But I stepped forward. Calmly, I opened my binder and placed 3 documents on the podium. The first is the original appointment letter signed by Richard Grayson, our former chairman, I said. The second is the legal HOA bylaw stating that no board member, not even the president, may suspend a sitting chairman without a supermajority vote. I looked around. Has such a vote occurred? Silence. No one raised a hand. Linda's face flushed. And lastly, I continued, Here is a statement from Green Crest Residential Holdings, confirming that I am still the recognized chairman of this HOA. I held up the paper. Gasps again. Cheers followed. Linda tried to shout over the crowd. Order, this is still my meeting. No, I said, turning to face her. This meeting belongs to the community. I stepped aside. And one by one, the residents rose. Martha Jenkins shared how Linda threatened to revoke her gate key for forgetting to return a lost dog flyer. Marcus told the room about Kevin's fines for riding a scooter. Sophia talked about the notes left on her car, the sudden safety inspections, the emotional toll. An elderly man shared how his monthly gardening fine had nearly bankrupted him. And then quietly, a man stood in the back. He wore a baseball cap, his voice was rough. My son's in a wheelchair. We built a ramp last year. Linda said it was not aesthetically aligned and demanded we remove it. That was the first time my boy ever saw me cry. Silence. Then the clapping began. Quiet at first, then louder, until the entire room was filled with the sound of hands coming together. Linda stormed out. Again. Later that afternoon, I sat alone on my porch, reflecting on what had just happened. My phone buzzed. It was an email from the local news station. We'd like to interview you. I hadn't planned to go public so soon. But maybe it was time. Before I could respond, Kevin came sprinting up the driveway. Mr. Turner, come quick, it's Miss Carroll. I grabbed my cane and followed him down the street. When I arrived at Miss Carroll's house, a small crowd had gathered. Her door was open. She sat on the porch step, her face pale, clutching a shaking hand. What happened? I asked. They tried to evict her, someone said. Board reps said she violated community standards for failure to maintain property. I felt my blood boil. Miss Carroll looked at me with wet eyes. They brought paperwork, threatened to take my house, Harold. I knelt beside her. Not on my watch. I turned to the crowd. Everyone listen up. We need to call the sheriff's office now. That eviction threat, it's illegal, and it's harassment. Phones came out. Calls were made. And just 20 minutes later, 2 squad cars pulled into Pine Hill Estates. But this time, they didn't come with suspicion. They came with support. They talked to Miss Carroll, took statements, took pictures, promised an investigation. The officers assured her, and everyone else, that no eviction was legal without a court order, and that anyone attempting one could face criminal charges. As night fell over Pine Hill, porch lights flicked on. Neighbors who had once hid behind curtains now stepped out to talk to one another. Kids played on sidewalks again. Chalk drawings appeared by the curbs. Laughter replaced whispers. Something was changing. But I knew we weren't done. Because Linda wasn't finished. She was hiding. Waiting. And whatever she was planning next, it was going to be big. The next morning I stood at my window watching the sunrise stretch over Pine Hill Estates. The streets glistened with dew, and the trees swayed softly in the breeze, but I felt it, calm before a storm. Something was brewing, something quiet and dangerous. After everything that happened with Miss Carroll, most people expected Linda Wilkins to crawl into a hole, but I knew better. Linda wasn't the kind of person to retreat for long. No, she was regrouping. And I was right. Because by midday, the community app lit up with a new message. This time, from the HOA board's official account. Subject: Pine Hill Emergency Board Vote. Time: tonight 7 p.m. Location: Clubhouse. Topic: Motion for Leadership Restructuring and Security Reinstatement. It was a full-out attack. They were trying to remove me. And they were doing it in the only way they knew how, through fear and confusion. I called Marcus and Sophia. I sent Kevin a message. I told them to start spreading the word door to door if necessary. We're not letting her turn this place into a fortress again, I said. Then I grabbed my cane and my binder and began walking the neighborhood house by house. I spoke to young couples, retirees, single parents, anyone who'd listen. I explained the situation and reminded them of their rights. This isn't just about me, I said again and again. It's about all of us. about whether we live in a community that works for us or against us. Some looked scared, others looked angry, a few looked ready. By evening, the entire neighborhood was buzzing. And by the time 7 p.m. rolled around, the clubhouse was full to bursting, every seat taken, every wall lined, people standing out into the hallway. Some had signs. One read, "No fear, no fines, no more LINDA." Linda sat at the head table, flanked by her loyal board members. She wore black this time, sleek and sharp, like a villain in a movie. She took the microphone and cleared her throat dramatically. "Thank you all for coming," she began, pretending to smile. "We've heard many concerns over the last few weeks, and as your board president, I've decided it's time we restore order to Pine Hill Estates." Someone in the crowd muttered, "Order or dictatorship?" Linda ignored them. "This emergency vote," she continued, "is about leadership stability. Mr. Turner's actions, while well-intentioned, have caused confusion, conflict, and increased risk of liability. We propose reinstating security patrols, suspending the Residents' Advisory Council, and appointing an interim chairman until things stabilize." My blood ran cold. Not because I was scared. Because she was trying to erase every ounce of progress we'd made. Before anyone else could speak, I stepped forward. "I object," I said loudly. She narrowed her eyes. "You're out of order, Mr. Turner." "No," I said, standing tall. "You're out of line." The crowd murmured. "I've got documents from Green Crest confirming my role. I've got over 30 testimonies from residents detailing harassment under your leadership. And I've got county officials who have reviewed your security contracts and declared them unlawful." Linda stood too. "This isn't a courtroom." "No," I said, "but it's a community, and these people deserve a say." I turned to the crowd. "If you believe in this neighborhood, if you want fairness, transparency, and peace, stand with me now." The room fell silent for a heartbeat. Then Marcus stood. Then Sophia. Then Kevin and his parents. Then Miss Carol. Then nearly half the room. Linda paled. "This isn't a vote," she shouted. "You're hijacking this meeting." "No," I said, "we're taking it back." I raised a printed petition. A petition I'd quietly started over the last week, signed by over 100 residents. Motion of no confidence in HOA President Linda Wilkins. Gasps. The bylaws allowed for it. If over 40% of the homeowners signed a petition of no confidence, a leadership vote could be triggered, and we had 63% of signatures. I handed it to the board secretary, who read it silently and then nodded. "It's valid," he said. Linda froze. "I'll sue every last one of you," she whispered. "No, you won't," I said gently, "because bullies always threaten lawsuits when they lose control." The crowd applauded. Linda, red-faced and shaking, stormed out. And for the third time she ran. But this time she didn't come back. Over the next few days, everything changed. The board appointed a temporary president, Martha Jenkins, until elections could be held. Security patrols were suspended. All pending fines were frozen and reviewed. Miss Carol's name was cleared. Kevin and the other kids got their play area back. And Sophia's flag was proudly flying outside her porch once again. The Residents' Advisory Council became official, 3 members from each street, elected by their neighbors. Kindness was no longer a risk in Pine Hill. It was policy. But just when I thought things were settling, something strange happened. Marcus called me, voice low and urgent. "Harold," he said, "you need to see this." "What is it?" "Check your mailbox." I walked to the curb and opened the small steel box. Inside there was no mail. Just an envelope. Plain white, sealed with red wax. Inside a single photograph. Linda, standing in front of a courthouse. Smiling. And behind her, 2 men in suits holding folders. I flipped the photo. On the back in handwritten ink. "You thought it was over. It's just beginning." I stared at the photo for a long time. The smile on Linda's face wasn't the smile of defeat. It was the smile of someone who had just made a deal, someone who had something dangerous up her sleeve. I turned the photo over again and again, reading the message. You thought it was over, it's just beginning. The handwriting was clean, professional, too careful to be emotional. It wasn't a threat scrawled in anger. It was planned, cold, calculated. I brought the photo inside and placed it on my desk beside the other documents I'd collected over the weeks, the fines, the fake notices, the security contracts. Linda had tried every trick in the book to control this neighborhood, and now she was working outside the neighborhood to fight back. But how? I spent the next few hours making calls, first to the county courthouse, then to Green Crest Residential Holdings, then to an old friend of mine from my Army days, Eddie Simmons, who now worked in property law. By mid-afternoon, I had my answer. Linda had filed a motion to form a private corporate HOA, separate from Green Crest, and had partnered with a real estate development firm to privatize Pine Hill Estates under a new management system. Her goal was to rezone the neighborhood into a semi-gated executive community. And the worst part, it was legally possible. If she got 51% of the homeowner votes and county approval, she could legally dissolve our current HOA structure and replace it with her own rules, her own board, and a property reassessment clause that could increase residents' fees by over 300%. It wasn't about control anymore. It was about profit. She was trying to turn Pine Hill into a luxury development, and we were the obstacles in her way. That night, I called an emergency meeting of the Residents' Advisory Council. We met in my garage, which we'd converted into a community space with chairs, lights, and a chalkboard. Marcus, Sophia, Martha Jenkins, and several others showed up, dozens more tuned in by phone. I stood in front of the chalkboard and explained everything I'd learned. She's filed paperwork to replace the HOA, I said. She's already gotten 2 developers to back her. If she gets 51% of homeowner signatures and pushes it past the county board, she'll take over everything, our bylaws, our streets, our homes. People gasped. What does that mean for us? Sophia asked. It means fees will triple, I said. Gardens will be regulated, rentals will be restricted, flags banned, children's play equipment removed, and if we can't afford the new structure. I paused. She'll start forcing people out. Miss Carroll raised a trembling hand. She can do that. If we don't act now, I said, she absolutely can. Silence filled the room. Then Martha stood. So what do we do? I looked around at them, all the people who had trusted me, who had followed me this far. We fight fire with fire. We spent the next 3 days preparing. Marcus created a digital petition system with real-time signature tracking. Kevin helped his dad create a website, Save Pine Hill.org, with information, video messages, and a community calendar. Sophia baked cookies and recruited volunteers to go door to door with flyers and packets explaining Linda's plan. Martha began calling every resident she knew personally, especially the older ones who didn't check email or use the app. I made phone calls, wrote letters, delivered speeches on porches and sidewalks. I talked to people who were skeptical, angry, and scared, and each time I said the same thing. You don't have to like me, but if you care about keeping your home, about deciding your own future, don't give Linda your vote. We held nightly town halls. Some nights the turnout was small, other nights the room overflowed. But slowly, signatures rolled in. We were building a blockade, a wall of people, not to keep anyone out, but to protect everyone within. Then came the bombshell. On the 4th day, Linda struck again. A courier delivered thick manila envelopes to every home in Pine Hill. Inside was an executive welcome packet from her new company, Wilkins Estates Management. The cover page read, "Exciting changes are coming to Pine Hill. Welcome to the future of luxury living. As one of our valued residents, you are invited to sign your approval and receive the following: upgraded security services, lawn maintenance included, exterior design consulting, HOA perks and event invitations, home value reassessment for long-term gains." On the back of the packet was a signature page. It was pre-filled. All anyone had to do was sign and return. It looked clean, professional, almost tempting. But I knew the fine print. If 51% of the homes returned that page, Pine Hill would be absorbed into Linda's corporate structure. Forever. That night, we held the biggest meeting yet. Over 120 people showed up. Some were panicked, others confused, a few were on the fence. But I came prepared. I stood in front of the crowd with the packet in one hand and a magnified version of the fine print in the other. "Do you see this line?" I said, pointing to the small text. "Homeowner acknowledges consent to new board, fee structure and zoning authority, including mandatory assessments and termination of prior agreements." Gasps. "She wants your signature, but once she has it, you lose everything." Martha stood beside me, holding up a map. "She plans to build a gate right here," she said, pointing to the south entrance, "and a parking lot where the children's park is." Cries of disbelief echoed. Sophia held up a folder. "And these," she said, "these are eviction notices from neighborhoods that signed onto similar plans in other counties. People who couldn't afford the new fees were forced to sell or taken to court." People stood up, shouted, demanded answers. I raised my hand. "Don't give her your signature. If you already did, you can still withdraw it. We've spoken to the county board. As long as you rescind it in writing within 10 days, your vote is invalid." We passed out withdrawal forms to everyone who had already signed. That night, we gained 37 signatures for our counterpetition. And 22 people withdrew theirs from Linda. But she wasn't done. The next morning, I woke up to a noise outside. Not birds. Not sprinklers. Engines. Construction engines. I stepped outside. 3 trucks were parked on the south end of the neighborhood. Workers in reflective vests were unloading fences, concrete blocks, and digging equipment. I walked up, cane tapping the pavement. "Excuse me," I asked one of the workers, "what's going on here?" "Temporary gate installation," the man said. "Wilkins Estates, we got permits last night." Permits at night. I called the county office immediately. After waiting 20 minutes, I finally got a supervisor. And when I told him the situation, he sighed. "I was afraid of this," he said. "Linda pulled strings and got emergency zoning approval for temporary construction, but it's only good for 72 hours unless she gets majority homeowner consent." I looked back at the workers. That meant I had 72 hours. 3 days. To stop this. To save Pine Hill. To protect everything we'd built. And if I did, Linda would win. She'd get her gate. She'd get her HOA. And she'd get our neighborhood. But not if I could help it. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Linda's grin, the construction trucks, and the steel posts being dug into the soil of Pine Hill like claws into flesh. Our streets weren't just being fenced, they were being claimed. If she kept that gate up for more than 72 hours, and if she reached that 51% homeowner approval mark in the meantime, she'd legally take over. The clock was ticking, and I had less than 3 days to save the neighborhood. I stood by my window and watched as the temporary gates continued to go up along the south end. Workers in hard hats moved quickly, following a well-rehearsed plan. It was clear Linda had been working on this for weeks behind the scenes. But what she didn't count on was us. By 6 a.m., I was already calling an emergency council meeting at Marcus' house. "We need to go door to door again," I said, packing the room with my cane. "This is the final push. We're not just informing people, we're getting signatures, every last one." Marcus pulled up the real-time counter on his laptop. "We're at 196 confirmed votes. That's 43%. We need at least 234 homeowners to beat her bid. That's 38 more. And only 63 hours left." "Then we get 50, I said. "No excuses." Sophia stepped forward with flyers. "We also printed emergency, withdraw your vote forms. If anyone signed Linda's paper and regrets it, we'll help them take it back on the spot." Kevin raised his hand from the couch. "Can I help again? I'll knock doors." I smiled. "You're our secret weapon, kid, let's move." That day, Pine Hill turned into a battleground of clipboards, flyers, and conversations on porches. We weren't alone. Neighbors started joining us, People who had stayed quiet for weeks now walked alongside us, knocking on doors, handing out forms, answering questions. Every few minutes, my phone buzzed with updates. Got 3 more on Pine Oak Drive. 2 rescinded Linda's forms. 1 old man invited me in for tea, then signed and called his neighbor over to sign too. Even Miss Carol joined in, walking the block with her cane and a stack of papers. If Harold can do it, she told folks with a smile, so can I. By 6 p.m., we were up to 221 votes. Just 13 more to go. We could feel it, the momentum, the community spirit, the quiet fire spreading across lawns and walkways. But then the blow came. That evening, Linda made her final move. She paid for a massive billboard to be mounted right at the neighborhood's main entrance. It went up just before sunset. It read in giant, golden letters, "The future of Pine Hill is here. Sign now before it's too late." And beneath it in fine print, "All current residents guaranteed buyback bonuses upon rezoning approval." People were confused, excited, nervous. Some thought they'd get cash. But it was a lie. The so-called buyback bonus was just legal jargon that meant if your house is bought out under the new zoning laws, you'll get a minor bonus payment, after fees, which could be years later or never. That night, I held an emergency live stream on our community site. I stood in front of that billboard, with Marcus holding the camera, and said, "This billboard represents everything that's been wrong in Pine Hill: empty promises, shiny distractions, and manipulation of the truth. The only future we need is each other. We don't need gates. We don't need luxury branding. We need kindness, connection, and control over our own lives. If you haven't voted yet, please do it tonight. If you already signed Linda's petition and regret it, withdraw it now. This is our home. Let's not give it away." Within 2 hours, the video had over 700 views. We got 6 more signatures. Now we were at 227. Just 7 more. The next day was Friday. The final day. We fanned out early, before sunrise. I took the eastern block. Marcus and Sophia hit the cul-de-sacs. Miss Carol, bless her heart, sat under a tree with a table, water bottles, and withdrawal forms, ready for anyone to come to her. People came. Some with doubt. Some with hope. Some with fear. But they came. By noon, we were at 231. By 2 p.m., 232. By 3:15 p.m. we were stuck. Too short. Then Sophia called me, her voice shaky with emotion. "I just got Mr. and Mrs. Harris on Elm Lane." That was it. 234. We had done it. But it wasn't over. Not until we submitted every signature and withdrawal form to the county office. So Marcus, Kevin, and I got in my newly repaired truck and drove straight downtown, folder in hand, nerves in our chest. At 4:12 p.m., we handed the packet over to the clerk. Stamped. Official. Confirmed. Linda's motion was dead. Pine Hill was safe. That night the air was electric. People poured into the park. No flyers, no schedule, no speeches. Just joy. Neighbors brought food. Someone brought a speaker. Kids ran barefoot in the grass, laughter echoing under the stars. Miss Carol danced to old Motown songs, and even the most reserved folks cracked open cold drinks and smiled for the first time in years. As for me, I sat on a bench with Marcus, watching Kevin chase fireflies. "You did it," Marcus said, handing me a bottle of soda. "No," I smiled, "we did it." Just then, Sophia ran over with her phone. Linda just posted something. We gathered around the screen. It was a blurry photo of a moving truck outside her house. No caption. Just a single red X. She was leaving. For good. Pine Hill Estates was ours again. Not because we fought her, but because we found each other. Because we remembered what it meant to be a neighbor. Because we chose community over control. And that made all the difference. The sun rose slowly over Pine Hill Estates the next morning, warm and quiet, like a deep exhale after a long, painful breath had finally been released. For the first time in weeks, maybe months, there were no violation slips on doorsteps, no angry whispers, no fear. Linda Wilkins was gone. Her house sat dark and empty, a for sale by owner sign tilted in the front yard. The gate she tried to install had been torn down by county order before midnight. The billboard, gone, replaced by a simple green sign that read, "Welcome to Pine Hill Estates, a community that cares." And we meant it. But I knew this wasn't the end of the story. Because fixing something that's broken isn't just about removing the bad parts. It's about rebuilding the good ones. I sat with the Residents Advisory Council that morning: Marcus, Sophia, Miss Carol, Martha Jenkins, and 3 newly elected members: David, a teacher; Felicia, a retired nurse; and Jonah, an artist and stay-at-home dad. We gathered in the newly repainted clubhouse, this time with the doors open and sunlight pouring in through the windows. On the whiteboard, Marcus had written, "What's next?" I stood slowly, leaned on my cane, and spoke from the heart. We won a battle, but a community isn't saved in one big moment. It's built in small ones, every day, on every street, in every quiet act of kindness we choose to make. Heads nodded. Sophia raised her hand. "I say we start with the kids. They've been through all this with us. Let's host a neighborhood field day. Let them run free for once." "Seconded," said David. "We can also do an art show in the park. Let folks show what Pine Hill means to them now." Felicia smiled. "And how about wellness checks for the older folks? No one should feel alone here anymore." "I'll take the back gate garden," Jonah added. "It's overgrown. Let's turn it into a community plot. Herbs, flowers, vegetables, let everyone contribute." It was beautiful. But then Marcus scrolled through his laptop and frowned. "There's one thing." Everyone turned. Linda might be gone, but she sold some of her management shares to a real estate firm before she left. It's called Bravestone Partners. I checked. They own a few properties here now. Rental homes. "So?" asked Jonah. "They've been known to buy up properties, raise rents, and flip neighborhoods into investor zones. Quietly. Legally." My chest tightened. "So the fight isn't over?" Marcus nodded. "Not yet, but we're ahead of it this time." Over the next few weeks, Pine Hill was transformed, not by force but by friendship. The field day was a massive success. Kids ran wild with painted faces, water balloons flew through the air, and even the grumpiest of old neighbors got roped into tug-of-war. The art show in the park brought tears to everyone's eyes. Children drew pictures of smiling houses. Teens painted murals of unity. One elderly woman knitted a quilt of all the street names in Pine Hill and donated it to the clubhouse. Felicia's wellness checks led to meals being delivered, porches swept, and forgotten birthdays celebrated. Jonah's garden. It bloomed, it sang. Tomatoes, peppers, wildflowers, laughter. It became a new heartbeat for Pine Hill. And me. I kept walking the neighborhood, talking, listening, not as a leader above but as a neighbor beside. People started trusting again, not just me, but each other. Until one day it happened. A black SUV pulled into the neighborhood. Out stepped a clean-cut man in a sharp gray suit. He knocked on Sophia's door. She was baking muffins. "I'm from Bravestone Partners," he said. "We're buying properties in the area and offering generous cash incentives to early sellers. You'd be a great fit." Sophia stared at him. Then she pointed to the camera on her porch. "Smile," she said. He blinked. She smiled. "You're being recorded and I'm not selling." She closed the door. Then she called me. I didn't hesitate. Within an hour, we had a flyer printed and posted at every intersection. "Investors not welcome. Pine Hill is not for sale. Community-owned, community-powered." We even made t-shirts. We held a block party in response to Bravestone's visit. And 3 days later, we received confirmation from the county office. Pine Hill Estates had officially filed as a protected residential preservation zone. Bravestone gone. And with them, any chance of history repeating itself. One morning a few weeks later, I sat on my porch with Miss Carol beside me. We watched the kids ride by on scooters, their parents chatting nearby, dogs trotting along happy sidewalks. "I never thought I'd live to see this," Miss Carroll said, wiping her eyes. "I thought I'd just grow old and invisible." "You're not invisible," I said. "You're the spirit of this street." She smiled. "And you, Harold Turner, you're the reason we're still standing." I shook my head. "No, I just held the flashlight. You all found the way out of the dark." We sat in silence for a while. Then Kevin rode by on his bike and shouted, "Harold for mayor." We laughed. I wasn't interested in politics, but I was interested in people. And in Pine Hill, that was finally enough. That evening, I pulled out an old journal and began writing a letter. To my wife, Elena. "My dearest Ellie, it's been a long road. You would have loved this place, not because of the houses, but because of the hearts that finally opened. I came here looking for peace. What I found was purpose. I thought I was too old to start over. But maybe the world always has room for one more act of kindness. You always told me to never stop believing in people. You were right. Pine Hill is safe now, not perfect, but growing, healing, becoming. And I'll be here, watching, walking, watering the seeds we planted together. With all my love. Harold." I closed the journal and smiled. Outside, the porch lights of Pine Hill twinkled to life one by one, like stars finding their way home. A full year had passed since the day Linda Wilkins called the cops on me, thinking I was just some old man squatting in her perfect neighborhood. A lot had changed since then. The Gates never returned. The fear that once crawled under doorsteps like a shadow, gone. The community that used to live behind blinds and bitter whispers now lived out loud. And me. I was still here. Still walking these sidewalks with my cane. Still stopping to chat with neighbors under blooming magnolia trees. Still watering the little community garden where Jonah grew tomatoes the size of softballs, and Miss Carroll now tended marigolds with the help of 2 teenage volunteers who once thought gardening was boring. But even though life had settled, the memory of that struggle never left us. It reminded us what it took to keep a neighborhood, not just build it. Because communities aren't made of fences and rules. They're made of people. And people need care. They need to feel seen. We celebrated the 1-year anniversary with a block party so big, the mayor showed up. That's right, the actual mayor of the city. She shook my hand and gave a short speech praising Pine Hill as an example of grassroots resilience and neighborhood unity. She called us a model for all communities struggling with corporate takeovers and authoritarian HOA regimes. Kevin's dad, Marcus, even got recognized with a Civic Leader Award for his tech work during the campaign. Sophia set up a cupcake booth and sold out in an hour. Miss Carroll, now the proud matriarch of Pine Hill, cut the giant cake shaped like our neighborhood sign. And someone, we never found out who, printed out a life-sized cardboard cutout of me in my fedora and sat it at the center of the park. It wore a sign that said, "HOA called the cops on me, now they obey me. Harold Turner." The kids loved it. I pretended to hate it. But secretly, I loved every second. Just before sunset, I stood up to say a few words, not with a mic, just with my voice. "Neighbors," I began, "I don't know how long I've got left in this world. Maybe 5 years, maybe 15, maybe just 1. But if I go tomorrow, I'll go with peace in my heart." I looked around. At the rows of families. At the smiles of people who had once feared opening their front doors. At the laughter echoing through trees. I came here looking for a quiet life. Instead, I found a fight. But I didn't fight alone. You stood with me. You stood with each other. And now we all stand taller for it. Kevin shouted, "We love you, Harold." People clapped. Someone even whistled. I gave a small bow. And I sat back down next to Miss Carroll. She patted my hand gently. "You saved us." I shook my head. We saved each other. And that was the truth. Months rolled by. The seasons changed. Leaves fell, snow came, then spring again. Pine Hill stayed strong. New families moved in, not investors but real people. People who were welcomed with fresh bread, handwritten cards, and neighborhood potlucks. Kids played outside again. Parents trusted their streets again. Elders were no longer forgotten. The HOA still existed, but it was run by the people for the people. No secret fines, no threats, just transparency, service, and care. Sophia eventually opened a small bakery right at the neighborhood's edge. She named it the Kind Crumb. She hired local teens and donated leftovers to the community center. Kevin, he became a neighborhood rep for the city's youth council. He still called me the general. And me, I spent my mornings writing letters, stories, and sometimes just thoughts I wanted to pass down. One of those thoughts I'll leave for you too. When people try to own what should belong to everyone, stand up. When rules become weapons, speak up. And when a neighbor needs a friend, show up. Because what saves a community isn't power, it's people. One evening, as the sun dipped below the tree line, I walked slowly through the neighborhood park. My cane clicked gently on the pathway. The air was filled with the smell of fresh-cut grass and grilled corn. The sky blazed orange and gold. I passed the garden, now blooming with roses, spinach, tomatoes, and sunflowers. I passed the swing set, where laughter rang out from the kids chasing fireflies. I passed Sophia's bakery, where the lights still glowed and the scent of vanilla warmed the sidewalk. And then I passed the community board, where someone had pinned a photo of me standing beside that very first board meeting, months ago. Underneath it was a note written in a child's handwriting. "Thank you, Mr. Harold. You helped my mommy feel safe." Maya, age 7. I stood there for a moment. A long one. And I smiled. Because that was everything. So if you ever hear about Pine Hill Estates, the neighborhood where an old man showed up and everything changed, know this. The real story isn't about me. It's about what happens when people remember they belong to each other. It's about how one act of kindness leads to another, and another, and another, until even the coldest street becomes home again. So the next time someone says, HOAs are impossible or communities are gone, tell them this. Sometimes all it takes is one neighbor, with a cane in one hand, and a heart full of hope in the other. Where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments.